Blog Talk Radio.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is?
Julie.
Huh?
Julie.
Huh? Guess what day it is?
Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is?
Anybody? Anybody?
Mike.
Huh?
What day is it, Mike?
Huh? Woo-hoo!
Leslie, guess what today is? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's hump day.
Hump day!
It's hump day.
Hump day!
Yes, this is the Donelson Files, Tom Donelson and Coco Konski, once again with another great adventure in radio broadcasting. I'm Tom Donelson. I am the chairman of Emeritus PAC and also the project director for America's Majority Foundation, the author of 8 books, including The Rise of National Populism and Democratic Socialism, What Our Response Should Be, and also co-authored the book Coming of Age, Andy Roddick's Breakthrough Year with his daughter, Bethany. So, and you, Coco.
Hi, everybody. What's going on? My name is Coco. I'm a writer, producer, I work in film, as well as politics, and I co-host the show every Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Yeah, well, like I said, we've got a lot to talk about, so we're going to get started here. We got some interesting news, obviously, the weird news, but we got a few things to talk about here. We've got politics. For those people who basically listen to the show, we already know what we're going to talk about Kamala Harris's drops in the polls, but if you've been listening to us for 2 weeks, we already stated the reason why, but we're going to go ahead and repeat it because, when the two of us are right, we need to remind people, right?
Right.
We're going to talk about Tom Steyer's campaign finance laws, Greenland, and we'll start off with the Omar and Talib last week's adventure in Israel. So maybe the question I'll ask you, what's your thoughts?
As far as what?
I guess let me put this. I'll get it started. My impression, when I look at when they went off to Israel, or I should say not Israel. Well, basically when Israel said no, you're not coming into the country, and my first thought was, well, how would this play out? And I tell you the truth, this is one of those things where, in my view, it hurts Omar, hurts Taleb, and it also hurts the Democratic Party in the long run, mainly because it wasn't just that the reason why they were turned down is because of the boycott, the BDS movement. The other aspect is it probably didn't help that they were being sponsored by a group called MIFTAH, which is MIFTAH, which basically, they're an anti-Semitic group. That's a nice way of putting it. It's like, and I think in the long run, the Democrats are going to have an issue with this because basically it kind of reinforces, with them as the face of the party. And so that's my view. I don't know if you had any opinion at all about their misadventures or the whole thing.
Right. Listen, I don't like Netanyahu. Can't speak. I don't like Netanyahu. I'm Jewish, and I think all listeners know that I am Jewish. I don't agree with a lot of Israel's policies. I think just because you disagree with certain policies of Israel does not make you anti-Semitic. What Rep. Omar has said in the past, people have criticized her, and rightfully so. And, what Donald Trump said this past weekend, I think he ought to be criticized as well. that's just really my opinion on this whole issue when it comes to, him talking about, well, if you're Jewish, you're a disgrace to being Jewish if you vote Democrat, which I think is total BS. I think that in itself was also a bit anti-Semitic as well. If you're going to call out Rep. Omar, you might as well call out Donald Trump as well for his remark on the Jewish people.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. Here's the problem. I'm going to pick on the Michigan Congresswoman in this case because she's proposed. I mean, she's on record, and she's the only Congresswoman so far on record of the single-state solution. And for those people who want to know what the single-state solution is, it's essentially it's the elimination of Israel, because basically it's the Palestinians running everything from the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Jerusalem, including what is present Israel. And I've always, and to me, I guess here's my problem that I have, and we'll get to, is that I know a lot of people dispute the BDS. I think that is anti-Semitic, but the single-state solution, this goes beyond. I mean, this is basically, you're talking about the elimination of the only Jewish state in the world. And she's taken that position, and it can't really be spent any other way. And so what's your thoughts on that? When you hear a congresswoman basically saying, we want Palestine to control everything. I mean, that's essentially what the single-state solution is. And she's on record. I mean, she even discussed this last year in the campaign, and she's been interviewed on this issue where she's basically discussing, that's what I'm for.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, and it's a very touchy subject, Tom. It's very, I have friends on both sides. I have friends in Israel and I have friends in Palestine. So it's a subject that's very touchy, and you have to really tread carefully when you are discussing something of this nature. It's almost like talking about abortion. You have to tread very lightly in this. And, there are extremisms on both sides, and that's where the problem lies ahead. There's no moderation in this issue. It's extreme on both sides. And,
well,
I think, and no, there is. Yeah. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying both sides need to be examined. And, you can bring up issues and I can bring up issues, and we're never going to agree or disagree on something because it's that type of an issue.
Well, okay, here's the point I would make here, because this is a problem I have, because I understand what you're saying. But here's the problem I have. First of all, number one, when you propose a solution that can only be interpreted one way, you can't just dismiss this out of hand. So, well, it's not just extremism here. We're talking a solution that eliminates a nation state. And the other aspect that comes into play is that, including the present government, they're already on the record saying of two-state solution, they are prepared to do that. And they certainly in 2001 had that option right in hand. I mean, let's just say 2000, Bill Clinton basically had the deal sitting right there in front of both Arafat and the center, at that time was the center-left government of Israel. They were ready to basically say, here's the two-state solution. And Clinton himself will admit it was Arafat who said, no, I'm out of here, despite the fact that he got pretty much every aspect of land that he wanted. And the question I would throw, and the problem you run into is that on one side, you got Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Hamas is controlled by Iran. It's essentially a satellite of Iran. And the Palestinian Authority, who pretty much runs the West Bank, until they, I guess the question, how do you negotiate with somebody until they basically said, you can have the right to exist, and when you've offered them that opportunity, how many times did they turn it down before you say, what are you really asking for? And that, to me, is the issue that you have, from my point of view.
Right. And like I said before, it's an issue that needs to be really discussed. This isn't like,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even think of something to compare it to. It's never going to be solved. I really think so. I mean, that's honestly what I think. It's not one of those, right or wrong type. I mean, that's what I honestly believe because, like I said, I have friends on both sides of these issues, and I'm not going to pinpoint like you're wrong or you're right.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to this issue, you're going to have extremists on both sides, and that's not good either.
Yeah. Well, I guess to me, the question, Tim, is you got one side basically saying we can coexist with you as an independent nation. We're just waiting for you to say yes. And that's been almost there for 70 years. The question is, to me, I think is until Israel, until Palestine themselves say, okay, we're ready to accept that. Maybe I'll throw out a story here, and then I'm going to let you comment, then we're going to go to a break. Is this I can remember in my daughter's neighborhood in New York, there was a chicken place run by Palestinians. And one day, like my sister, my daughter sitting there in line, going to pick up some chicken to go home. On the way home, and right in front of her, and this lady looks at this map of Palestine, and she kind of stayed, and she was looking at it, and she said, "Where is Israel located?" And the guy said, "No, it's all Palestine." And and my daughter told me, I said, "Well, there's your answer why you have an issue." But I thought that was it because they had a map of Palestine, including where Israel was. And that to me was one of those striking things. Wow. I mean, there was a map and they put it there and they put it in their store for everybody to see. And I think that to me is the one issue that, to me, that's the heart of the issue. You've got one party ready to say, we'll give you this, we're ready to shake your hands and accept a two-state solution, which has been the original solution from 1947. The question is, when did the other side shake hands back? I'm going to go ahead and let you finish up there, then we're going to do a quick ad. Another great program of the Bachelor Radio News Network. And this is Tom Donelson and Coco Konski. Okay, Coco.
Right. Well, I'm just going to wrap it up by saying, I think we need to look at both sides of extremism, and, there's no such thing as moderation when it comes to Palestine and Israel. And, if we don't look at that, if we keep looking at that as both extremists, you're never going to go anywhere.
Right. This is, again, right now, here's another great programming on the Bachelor Radio News Network.
Hey, this is L.A. Bachelor reminding you, if you're looking for real discussion on sports, politics, religion, and other topics, you need to join us on Mondays at 6 p.m. Eastern at WCOMFM.org, on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. at blogtalkradio.com/LA-Bachelor, and on Thursdays at the same web address. Follow us on Facebook at Pad Nation, on Twitter, Pad Nation, the number 2, at Twitter, LinkedIn, and you can email us with your requests, your comments, your concerns, anything you want at our email address at LABachelor with a T, BATCHELOR 40@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and Pad Nation, Instagram, and of course, if you miss any part of our broadcast, make sure you go to thebachelorpadnetwork.com and listen and enjoy the Bachelor Pad.
Yes, you can catch this show and other shows on the Bachelor Radio News Network, on the bachelorpad.com, tunein.com, and Coco can tell you how to get it through iTunes.
Right. Just click on podcast on iTunes, Apple. You click the LA Bachelor Pad or the LA News Network, I believe it is, Tom.
News Radio Network, yeah.
Yes, just hit Donelson Files, and you guys can download us. And if you guys are going on a long road trip, you guys can hear my voice through all the Palm Springs and wherever you guys are headed. So do that.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So, okay, let's go real quickly to Donald Trump's statement. Let me tell you how I interpret it, because I know you're going to have it, then I'll let you blast off. I kind of viewed it. I don't view it in the same way as you did. I just viewed it as in Donald Trump's sometimes does not always needs to sometimes write a script, but he's basically saying, in fact, it's time for Jewish voters to rethink their loyalty to the Democratic Party. That if indeed you got, and I believe this to be the case, and you and I have disagreed on this, but when you got people like Omar Talab who are putting out proposals that, quite frankly, could mean the end of Israel. And I'm not just saying that is the only issue. And certainly that's, it's, maybe there's that time to come in play where each different demographics have to look at and say, how are you going to vote? Because 2020 is going to be an interesting election. And I think that was a challenge. I know you've interpreted it different. I interpret it as simply saying, you know what, maybe it's time for you guys to start thinking about, because this is being tolerated within the party that you've been part of as a coalition.
Right.
Your thoughts?
I mean, you make a good point, and as far as, what Trump said, if you're going to criticize Omar Rep, you need to criticize Donald Trump as well for what he has said about whether you agree with him or not. It was just inappropriate.
Well, I know it's one of those political things that, and it sometimes is like today. He used the word chosen one, dealing with somebody. There was a question in China. And again, a lot of people made big deal of the chosen one. And I read the whole quote, and it's like, okay, here's what what he was saying. He was asking a question from China. He said, well, this is that moment where we need to be looking at China. We need to confront them on their trade practices. And if we don't do it now, and he basically said, and again, I interpret this as just simply saying, I'm the one who was chosen, elected to do that particular job to see what can be done. Now, the word chosen one made it sound like he's the Messiah, but in fact, what he was saying, this is that moment, and I was chosen and voted to be in that moment. It was much less. I can always remember when Ronald Reagan first came into office. Now, Reagan was much better at phrasing things, but there was he gave a speech to his cabinet, and he said, "Okay, this is our moment. If we don't do it, nobody else will." He was making a point. These are the policies we were elected to. And sometimes, and again, it's those choice of words, but I don't view this as one of those things that, oh my God, what I interpret it as, hey, I was elected because one of the reasons I was elected was dealing with China. I was chosen to do that job. That's what I'm attempting to do. And essentially, we had that discussion yesterday. Your thoughts?
Right. I mean, I just, man, and just the stuff that every time I hear that comes out of the news, whether, it's like the Onion has become real life to me.
Yeah.
It's just, I've actually gave myself a week off from the news, and it's been really nice so far.
Yeah.
I'm trying, really hard, because if I see one more crazy headline, I actually may have to get. I might have an aneurysm.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna put it this way. I agree with you because I read the Onion. They're one of the ones I read, and I love the Babylon Bee, which is the conservative version of the Onion. But they're both funny. They're both hilarious. But there's these moments you read this stuff, and it's like, I really feel bad for satirists in today's society because you satire something, and the next day, 2 days later, it happens. And I kind of feel like, these are not supposed to be really news sites, but yet, do you ever get the feeling they are real? It just seems like, you just stated, we live in the world of Babylon Bee and the Onion coming true. It's like, there are these things, how do you satire something that keeps coming true? Maybe that's a nice way of putting it.
Right.
So.
I mean, I don't even know what to tell you.
Yeah. But like I say, because those are two, I read both of them every day, and they are both hilariously funny. But there are those moments you read the stuff and you just say to yourself, how close to the truth these satirists are becoming.
Right.
Maybe in a way, maybe the way I'll put it this way, because I was thinking about this. And I'm going to make a statement that's going to kind of, and I'm not going to say, I'm going to make this statement about the media today. And this is maybe part of, like I say, maybe you've got the right approach. Just, spend a whole week without watching the news. Unfortunately, in my day, I do tend, like I said, I spend most of my mornings getting caught up in the news cycle strictly because that's what I'm in the political business. That's what I have to do for a living. But it can be rather a depressing sight. But we live in a world where almost, I want to phrase this in a way because I'm not saying that Breitbart is the symbol, is the righteousness when it comes to accuracy. That's not the case. And certainly not the gateway pundit. But when you live in a world that there are certain stories where you literally can get a better, more accurate from Breitbart than you can from the New York Times, that's when we live in, that to me is the biggest problem that I see. Because we don't necessarily have that neutral, what I call media, where you can just sit back and look at it and say, okay, they're trying to be unbiased, they're just reporting the news. I think Slate just basically came out with essentially what they did, they came out something with the New York Times where they had where I guess the editors were discussing with the reporters, and they were essentially saying, in effect, okay, we screwed up the Russian investigation, but we have an audience. We have an audience that expect us to go after Donald Trump day in and day out. They were in effect admitting our job is not to report the news on the front page. It's to be part of the resistance because this is the people who are left reading our newspaper. This is what they expect. They're in effect admitting they're a political newspaper as opposed to a newspaper. And I think there's a tragedy in that. And it's not just, I'm going to pick on the New York Times, but you can look at the Washington Post. And there are very few reporters I can sit back and say, because I know you look at certain Fox reporters, you know what they're going to say. You look at certain CNN reporters, you know what they're going to say. And there are very few. One of the few I know, you have a good friend, Jake Tapper. I mean, you're a friend of Jake Tapper. I think he's one of the few that I can look at CNN and say, well, he's at least trying to have both sides. He's at least willing to look at both sides. But he's becoming the exception to the rule, not the rule. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, quite frankly, you guys made a good case. I mean, so in the week of no news, what did you look at? What did you read?
Honestly, I have just been I've been binge watching the show called Gangland.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've
Okay,
been
now
doing,
what-
Tom, with my entire week. Is I've been working on scripts. I told you I've been working on a movie.
Right. So what's very quickly, what's Gangland about?
All right, boys and girls. Coco's going to explain something to you. So Gangland is an amazing show. It was on History Channel. I've been watching it on YouTube.
Okay.
It's basically I'm trying to figure a way to explain it. It's a look inside America's most notorious gangs, like the Blood, the Crips, the Zetas, the Cartel, and they do like in-depth like interviews with those who were members, those who are still members, former members. It's an amazing show. It's seriously, it's so eye-opening and it's so crazy. Like the stuff you wouldn't believe. Like, the cartel has more rank than Al Qaeda does. Like by far. That's something I didn't know. And so, watching the show is just like, holy crap. Like you're watching the show and you're just like, oh my God. They're gangs like up in Anchorage, Alaska, like Utah. Like there's a Mormon Crips gang, that like they volunteer at the church and then they go cut someone's head off. Like it's crazy. It's a very interesting show. It's become one of my favorites. Like I'm on season 4. If that tells you how much I binge. So that's what I've been doing. I've been working and then I've been binging Gangland.
All right, let me ask you a question on that because it's kind of intriguing to me because what you're talking about is the control. We don't realize how much control and where, these particular gangs. We kind of view them as gangs, but they're more than just gangs in many ways. They're kind of similar to, let's say, the old Italian mafia. Is that what would that be your phraseology to describe them?
I think the mafia is not as bad as these guys.
Mm-hmm.
I think these guys make the mafia look like children, to be honest.
Yeah. I tell you, it's a very interesting story in that, and I'm going to get your comment on it. Maybe this was covered in Gangland, but he was an interesting. I remember 2011.
You want to know like the hardcore criminals, like really in-depth like looks and like how and why they do this. Like it is so fascinating. It's a bit of an older show. It's from 2007 to 2015. And then they have a new show called Gangland Undercover, which I have to start watching as well. But you guys can go on YouTube, Daily Motion, really anywhere online and watch it. I mean, it's so fascinating. It's like, I started with one episode, and one episode led to 5, and 5 led to like 15. And then, soon I just basically got hooked. So.
Right. Well, then what we're going to do real quick, this is Tom Donelson, the Donelson Files with Coco Konski, Tom Donelson on the Bachelor Radio News Network. And we'll have another promotion for yet another great show.
If you want to hear another view of the latest developments in Trump's Washington, listen to the Dr. Larry Show. Every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Dr. Larry is a former businessman, entrepreneur, college president, and author who provides background and context for current events and trends in politics, education, foreign policy, and religion from a conservative perspective. Tune in and hear the other side as Dr. Larry talks with Washington insiders exclusively on blogtalkradio.com and the podcast at thebachelorpadnetwork.com.
Yes, the Dr. Larry Show is going to follow this show. He's going to be covering healthcare issues once again with Dr. Edward Creagan of the Mayo Clinic. So stay tuned at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, Coco, would you kind of repeat what you just stated?
What would you like me to say about which part?
Okay. You were talking about how they were even worse than the mafia, and then you were kind of describing it a little bit more detail.
All right. So, there's different types of gangs, obviously. I think we all go through, we really want to know about gang phase. I mean, if you're like me who listens to, like really hardcore rap, and you're just like, yeah, I want to know all about that. I started going through this show called Gangland, and it's been around since 2007. It's a 1-hour kind of, documentary, and they talk about, all the different, the Bloods, the Crips, the Zetas, which are obviously the cartel, the El Salvadorian gangs, gangs that are up in Alaska, the Mormon Crips. Yes, they are Mormon Crips, for those who do not know about this, who actually go on missionaries for the church and then end up going and doing murders right afterwards. So that was a very interesting episode that I had seen. It goes really. What they do is it's not like your regular documentary. It's like they interview those inside the gang, and you don't see their face. They disguise the voices. They'll interview informants. They'll interview people who are still in the gang, those who got out. And it's crazy. It's such a good show. It's it really gives you an in-depth look how crazy it is. I mean, some of these guys they joined the gang at age 8 because they don't have families, or some of them do come from good families, but they still want an outlet, So it's a very informative show. I became hooked on it. I'm on season 3. There are about 7 seasons. They also came out with another show called Gangland Undercover, and yes, I totally think the mob is like children compared to these guys. You just watch. You just watch an episode or two, and you're gonna call me up, and you're gonna be like, "Oh my God, Coco, you are so right."
Yeah.
Trust.
Well,
it's crazy.
Let me give you a story, and I want to kind of get your comments, see if anything similar that you've seen. Okay, 2011. I had a gentleman that I had worked with who he passed away since then. But he was a pollster, but he was out of Chicago, and he basically had his pulse in Illinois politics. I mean, he pretty much knew everybody on both sides, and we got talking about politics, getting the vote out, that stuff. And he says, Tom, you got to stand something. There are parts of Chicago where the gangs are responsible for getting the votes out. And they're essentially that these ward, these individual running these wards are essentially they're indebted to these gangs. And
right.
As he put it, he says, and it's like they know where you live. So it's kind of like they're knocking on your door and you say, have you voted yet? And usually they're going to know if you voted because when the politics say you got a list of, okay, this guy's voted, this guy voted, oh, this person hasn't showed up yet. Normally you call them up, hey, Mrs. So-and-so, we just want to remind you it's today's election day. Well, they'll knock on your door and they'll say, today's election day.
Right.
George Bull is looking for your help. And, this poor, these voters are like, okay, we'll be happy to go to the ballot box right now with you.
Right.
And I have to say, my first thought was, God, this sounds crazy. This just sounds, because I never viewed, these gangs as that powerful or well organized to that extent. And lo and behold, 8 months later, one of the Chicago newspaper breaks a story about how these wards, aldermen were basically in the pocket of some of these gangs, or they were literally in their pocket. And I'm like, oh my God, Michael got this one right. I better start listening. This guy knows his stuff. But I don't know, have they ever, was there anything like that ever covered in any of these episodes?
Right. I mean, you're very interested in this stuff, which I am. I love this stuff. I think it's super fascinating. I actually forced my boyfriend to watch this for literally the entire day. until he forced me to go outside. Like, literally, it was just, okay, another episode. I promise this is the last episode. I promise. But it's like, nope, it wasn't the last episode. But, I mean, I always find this stuff super, super fascinating, and I love these type of documentaries. So if you are like me and you're very interested in this, I highly recommend this show. And if you guys have probably seen this show, you guys probably have. So you know what? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, again, it sounds like an interesting concept, but it's like I say, it's kind of an interesting. What you're telling us is an interesting eye-opening that deals with what many of these major cities are dealing with in many ways, and that it's also spread beyond those major cities into where, let's say, as you say, Alaska and Utah. But all right,
right. The Mormon one was a total trip.
Yeah. So now, okay, going to other news. This is one of those interesting stories only because people made fun of Trump for saying this. Buying Greenland.
Oh God.
There was all. But here's the kicker in all this. This is not the first time we've actually discussed this with Denmark. This is like the third or fourth time over the years we've tried to buy Greenland. And I'm sitting there, and there was some very interesting. The more I read, the more. Well, you know what? Why have the more I thought, the more I read, the more I realized. You know what? This is not the dumb idea that people are making it out. First of all, number one, we have a defense treaty with Denmark that gives us virtually unlimited rights at their northern base. We essentially have an air base at north part of Greenland. It's like 750 miles actually north of the Arctic Circle. It's part of our ballistic missile early warning signs. And interesting enough, China is now expressing an interest by trying to get an economic foothold in Greenland and trying to finance, let's say, airports with the idea of gaining more control. So, in other words, I'm looking at this and I'm reading this, and I'm like, we can make fun of this, but there is a real reason to purchase Greenland. I mean, joking aside, it's not, an interesting thing. There's like 56,000 people who live there, and they essentially they have an autonomous government. They kind of run themselves. Mm-hmm. The only thing they don't have is the foreign policy security is handled by the Danes, by Denmark. But beyond that, it's like, they do whatever they want to do government-wise. And so, in effect, we'll be inheriting a group of people who already govern themselves. But it's an interesting, it's not the stupid idea that people made it out to be. That's my thought. I know when you first heard it, what was your first idea? What's the first thing that popped in your mind?
That he's an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. And my first thought was,
thing that popped in mind that he thought maybe there'd be oil.
Yeah.
And then he canceled it, and then I thought, wow, he really is an idiot.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, there are a ton of minerals as well. I mean, it's very rich in minerals. It's under, about a mile's worth of ice. But it's there, so it's not like, again, like I say, it's one of those things. You look at the story, you read the story, you say, God, what the hell? It's a WTF type of moment. And then you start reading what Greenland has to offer, and you start reading how other countries have their own interest in it, and you start thinking to yourself, this is not so stupid of an idea after all. So now we're going to go right straight into politics politics, and we kind of touched on this yesterday, but I want you know, and this was a question we had, and we didn't get a chance to kind of finish it up this yesterday, but one of the questions I put forth is, Tom, are we being is you're being a hypocrite to talk about campaign finance rules when you have a guy who essentially is going to basically pay for his own campaign? And Tom Steyer. I know you had some thoughts, but we never had a chance to really sit down and explore that.
Did I have some thoughts?
Yes. Well, do you have any thoughts that
well, for him, like I said, if you want to be in the race, you're going to be shelling out millions and millions and millions, and you better have the money to back it up. It's nice, for those who want to stay in the race, but you have to have the money to back you up. You got to have the Bernie Sanders money. You got to have the Kamala Harris money. You got to have a name for yourself, and not just a name for yourself, but you got to have the money to back it up. I think that's really, really important. I don't think you're not going to win any other way. I mean, how are you going to get your name across? I don't think you're going to.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Because like I said, I live under campaign finance law, so I pay an attorney a retainer every month whose job it is make sure all the paperwork gets done correctly. And if there's any question, I say, what do you think? And they'll say, nah, that's illegal, or that's not good, or that's legal, but you're better off staying out of that thicket, that type of deal. And, here's the interesting thing, because I'm going to, do my view on campaign finance laws in general. First, I could care less if Tom Steyer spends all the money he wants, if that's his right to do so. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you do need the money to get your message out. But here's a little thought. I mean, first of all, rule one, whenever I hear a reporter use the word dark money, there are two things that come to my mind. One, either A, the guy's a propagandist, or B, he's an idiot. Because here's, first of all, here's let me kind of do an very quick explanation. There are 501c type organizations. There are 501c3, 501c4. These organizations, they're not necessarily just campaign. They're mostly what I would say issue-oriented, or they're devoted to issues, devoted to groups, devoted to causes. An example, the ACLU, the NAACP have 501c3s. Most of these are educational, and a 501c4 is a combination of education and politics. And the reason why you keep, that they haven't, like I say, the IRS knows who donates these money. They know who's donating, but it's against the law to make this public. And the reason is it protects those individuals from threats. What people don't realize that in the 1950s, the KKK sued to get the membership of the NAACP. And we know exactly why they wanted it, either harassment or worse. And the Supreme Court said, no, they have a right. They're fighting for, like I say, social justice. They're fighting for this cause. They have a right to keep themselves protected from the likes of you. We know who they are. You don't need to know who they are. And that's what people define as dark money, that people have a right to protect. And if you want to kind of know a secret, I don't know if you remember about a couple of weeks ago when the Congressman Castro doxed Trump supporters in his district. And many of these people got threatening phone calls from people. And what people have to understand, now again, my organization, you can get the donor list from the FEC. I mean, you can just go look it up. It's available. You can look up Open Secrets. It's available. It's available. So, but most people don't do that. So on one side, Castro was releasing data that you could have easily looked up. On the other side, it kind of should be reminding people why, for example, 501c3s, that you have these laws to protect the donors from these kinds of threats. And so, like I said, when I look at these campaigns and I look at Tom Steyer, I said, you know what, I don't care. Because Tom Steyer has a lot of 501c organizations that he funds or that he's put together or that other. And quite frankly, I guarantee you, we really don't know how much of the money, how much money he actually donates, because he donates a lot of 501c organizations, at least he did until he decided to run for president. But there was a reason why people, they are protecting these donors from being released to the public because of what I just stated. These are historical reasons, and I don't have any problem with Tom Steyer doing it. I don't have any problems with names not being released. I don't view this as dark money because the history is there. There's a history why you don't release this information. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I pretty much agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and like I say, because this is the thing. I mean, because this is the one thing. Because this always irritates me. When I read stuff that says to me, "dark money," I'm like, my favorite story.
Right.
This is my favorite story. I had some reporter, wanting to from New York, set up an interview with me, and he immediately started talking about my donors. I said, "You don't need me to know who my donors are, and I'm not going to talk about them. If this is a conversation about donors, this interview is over." And I said, "By the way, there's this group that's competing against me in the same state. That's a Democratic run." And I said, "So, by the way, who's donating money to these people?" The guy stopped. He said, "Well, they're a 501c4. I can't get that information." And I'm like, "Okay. You mean they're dark money?" I kind of chided him. And he kind of said, "Yeah." And I said, "Then if you're not going to talk about the donors list of my opponents, what makes you think I'm going to give you the satisfaction of doing the same thing for me?" And that was the last I heard from the guy. I have not heard from that guy since.
Yeah.
Now.
Totally.
Yeah. Now, a story which we stated on this show, you and I discussed this when we said Kamala Harris is going to become a dead candidate walking. Well, the last CNN poll basically has her down to like 5% support. 2 months ago, she was like 17. And we both kind of made the judgment. And again, I'm going to bring this up because once again, Tom and Coco nails it. We nailed this 2 or 3 weeks ago. This was going to happen. So I like to brag about what we did. And the answer is very simple. What was exposed was not a bad performance as much as issues that were counter to what the party she's running in. When you're dealing with, let's say, you talked about the libertarian side of sex workers. We talked about, her going after marijuana users, having people stay in jail for extra time so she can get the state of California to get free workforce. Things like that. Those are the things that you can't sit back and deny. I mean, it's now part of the record, and if you're going to spend the rest of your, from this point forward, I said, from this point forward, she's a dead candidate walking. And now we're into the big three, which is Warren, Sanders, and Joe Biden is still hanging on at the top. So congratulations, Coco, for once again being right.
Well, Tom, what can I say?
Yeah.
What can I say? Well, speaking of which, I know we're kind of running out of time, but you have any exciting plans for the weekend?
Actually, yes, I do, because I will be in New York.
Woo-hoo!
I will
New
be
York.
basically New York. I mean, Monday and Tuesday we're at the U.S. Open tennis tournament.
Perfect.
And sometime Saturday night we may be at the City Park watching New York Mets play the Atlanta Braves. Like I said, we're going to go.
Wait, hold on. Okay, so we're going to have a problem here because my boyfriend is from Atlanta, Georgia, and so he's a huge Braves fan, and I'm a huge Mets fan. So there might be some fighting over the weekend for me. So
yeah,
no,
what,
he's a huge Atlanta anything.
Yeah, well, like I say, it should be a good weekend of baseball. So we got that planned, and I think we talked about, like I say, the New York Jewish Museum, which I've never been to, and my daughter
it's
says
fantastic.
that.
I've been there.
Yeah, and she said you'll love it. And then there's a spy museum as well that we're going to. And
the spy
so we're going to hit that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, see that. So we're going to hit those two things, and then we're going to have. So, and we always have a lot of fun. We'll hit the nice restaurants throughout the city. She's got like 6 whole days off, so who knows? I may try to meet up with some friends while I'm there. So, yeah, I can't wait. It's like I say, it's kind of like R&R, and I may even find some time to get a little business in, so as well. But like I said, it's New York, and we always have a great time doing this. So
that's excellent.
So how about you? What you got going this weekend?
Oh, my Lord, my plans. Well, so I'm actually introducing my boyfriend to the rest of my friends this week, so it's kind of a big deal. I don't know how it goes for you guys, but this is like my first serious relationship in like ever. This is so sad. It's like I'm 31 and it's like my first serious relationship. God help me. So yeah, he's met basically all my friends except for a few, and so we are all going out to dinner and yeah, so not nervous whatsoever, Tom.
Yeah.
I'm nervous.
Well,
I'm nervous.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. How you got decent friends, right? I mean, I know I've talked to Mike.
Yeah,
and then there's that. And then you got the actress who. God, what's her name?
Well, my friend that he's meeting, she's actually a supermodel. Yes, I have friends that are supermodels. Leave me alone. She's a fantastic model. She just came back from a stint in Europe. So she had called me up actually earlier today, and she like found out I have a boyfriend, and she's like, "Where is he?" And I'm like, "At work." So yeah, so that's like. I was like, well, I guess you're going to have to meet him eventually. So eventually it's turned into Saturday. So, yeah, so that's what's going on in my life. And now the entire world knows. Oh,
well, let me ask you a question. Have you met his friends yet?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I met them within 3 weeks of dating him. And we're on month number 4. 3 or 4 now. God, it's so sad. It's like we're like this old married couple now. I know, it's like we're this old married couple now. All we do is like watch TV together.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know. I think that's pretty nice. I mean, he seems like a nice fellow. It's
very wonderful. Oh, he's the best. He's the best.
Yeah.
Well, he got me, so he got me.
Well, he's got good taste. So,
clearly.
what can you say? Clearly,
he has
he knows
taste,
a good.
Obviously.
Yeah, he knows a good catch when he knows a good catch when he sees one. So
absolutely. And the most ridiculous thing, we met off Tinder. So I always tell people, like, we always talk about Tinder and how like ridiculous it is. It is not ridiculous. You could still meet the person You know, I wasn't looking for anything serious, and then boom, it just like hit me in the ass, and literally I'm now in a serious relationship. So, yeah. You never know, Tom. You never know with these sites. You know, you never know. So
yeah, well, I don't.
It's when,
when
you're not looking for someone, that's when you find them.
Well, like I say, having not
But on that
done those,
note,
having not done those lists, those sites,
well, you
I
don't
would not
need
know
that.
that much.
You're married.
I know, that's what I mean.
You don't need that. You don't need that. This is for the single people out there who are listening to the show. You know.
Yeah.
It works. It works, guys.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I say, we're basically going into the last minute of this show. So,
yes, we have.
So this has actually gone by pretty quickly. So we've had a kind of nice discussion of everything, covered everything, and so I know next Wednesday you've got the show. So
I will be hosting next Wednesday by myself. If you guys want to tune in and listen to some disaster, tune in.
Well, who never knows?
It won't be a disaster. It won't be a disaster to see me talking about my life. Come on, you guys. Be fun.
I would say
tune in.
Yeah, that's not disaster. Yeah, no, that's worth tuning into. So, absolutely.
I think you all should tune in.
Look.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. This is Tom Donelson, Coco Konski, with the Donelson Files. We're all saying good night here on the Bachelor Radio News Network. And now it's that time for Dr. Larry.
At work. Note the new name, and I'm Dr. Larry Fedewa, your host for the next hour. Tonight we are talking about something a little different. It's not quite politics, although it's now one of the major areas of discussion in the upcoming 2020 presidential race, and that is. Tonight's topic is based on a piece that I wrote a couple of years ago when the backlash against Obamacare first inspired Republicans to talk about, quote, repeal and replace. Since they're still talking, and since the Democrats are now also talking about health care alternatives, especially the federal takeover of all health care, the topic remains open for new ideas. I have approached this topic from the perspective of a clean sheet. Why try to build a new system on the bones of a failed system that no one likes? Why not instead build a new system on the foundation of goals which everyone accepts and agrees with? And this proposal is my answer to that question. But before I outline the new system, I'd like to point out that there are very few differences in the way the ordinary American will experience health care. Number one, instead of having their health insurance premiums deducted from their paychecks, the average American will be responsible for paying those premiums themselves. The easiest way to handle this would be through banks' auto pay. Second, the premiums will probably be cheaper than the current payments because of the competition for your business. Third, you will pay your insurance premiums through an organization of your choice, your credit union, church, town, neighborhood association, or a specialized medical insurance organization. Your medical insurance will not depend on your employer or your employment. Fourth, when medical bills do come due, they will be paid by your own insurance company, possibly using your medical savings account funds as well. And fifth and most important, the life and death medical decisions for your family will be made by you and not by the insurance company or the government. And that's it. That's the only differences. The starting point for a discussion of the national health care system should be setting our goals. I believe that the American health care should be, number one, of high quality and state of the art. 2, it should be available to everyone, universal coverage of some sort. 3, affordable. 4, abundant. And 5, well-funded. So what are the principal obstacles to these goals? First is the shortage of medical personnel. This shortage has 2 facets. There are not enough professionals produced in the first place, and too many drop out before their time, mainly due to frustration. There are whole areas of inner cities in rural America, for example, that have no physicians at all. Why? Because our medical schools do not graduate enough doctors to serve the population of the United States. Why not? Lack of intelligent students? Lack of students who are motivated to give their lives in service to humanity? Not at all. The reason is lack of money. Medical education is so lengthy and so costly in this country that very few students can afford to go to medical school. And this situation has created a national crisis. One very good use of taxpayer funds would be to offer medical and nursing school students free tuition, open to all qualified students. We do it for the military, why not for doctors and nurses? The cost would be minuscule compared to the Department of Defense or Department of Agriculture's subsidies. This policy would have massive return on public investment. More doctors would increase coverage of the population. More doctors would increase competition for the patient dollar. More could devote themselves to research, new people, new ideas, new openness to change. The quality of care would go up and the cost would go down, a mantra we have been hearing a lot about lately. This program would also assure the continuing support for the U.S. medical technology, which is already the envy of the world. So how do we provide adequate funding? We can start with where does the $3.5 trillion we now spend on health care, where does it go? The money flow starts with the employers who pay the insurance companies out of profits. It then goes mainly to the vast bureaucracies of the insurance companies, which distribute the money, the government, which oversees the money, and the hospitals and practitioners last, who must respond to the companies and to the government. Only about 1/5 of the $3.5 trillion spent on healthcare gets to the practitioners. So how can we simplify this labyrinth? It is a drag on the efficiency of the economic system by vastly increasing the cost of starting and staying in a business, and it is also a drag on the healthcare system by removing individuals from the opportunity of seeing to their own health needs. A patient-centered system also reduces the role of federal and state governments, which account for 61% of health expenditures. The patient doesn't need the insurance company or the government. If both the government and the insurance companies were completely eliminated from the system, nearly 2/3 of the cost of the American health care would be gone. Of course, there will always be some need for both, so assume that half of that cost would be taken care of, would be less. At today's rates, that would be $2+ trillion. There is still a place for insurance companies in this system, although dramatically reduced. The most obvious place is for catastrophic insurance, a safety net for when something very expensive happens to someone in the family, or the church, or the credit union, or whatever assembly of people the individual chooses to participate with. This brings us to the role of governments. You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor News Radio Network.
Hey, this is L.A. Bachelor reminding you to join us on the Donelson Files with your host, Tom Donelson and Coco Constantly. Join them and listen to all the topics and discussions on Mondays on WCOMFM.org or on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at blogtalkradio.com/LA Bachelor. It is politics that you've never heard before on the Donelson Files. And if you miss any part of their broadcast, you can listen to the podcast at our website, thebachelorpadnetwork.com.
You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Bachelor Radio News Network. We're talking about the place of the government in a new concept or a new system of health care. And the first federal government act should be to lift all interstate commerce restrictions on insurance companies so that they are free and invited to offer policies in any and all of the states they wish to compete without the necessity of creating a separate bureaucracy for every state they enter. The second federal reform should be the creation of a program for federal aid to qualified students in medical professions. My suggestion would be a free education in exchange for a period of service in underserved areas of practice, such as rural or inner city areas that are no doctor zones. A third federal reform would dramatically reduce the national health care costs in the form of health reform. Everyone makes mistakes, even including medical practitioners and hospitals. It is the federal government's role to protect both the treatment sector and the patient. But the current practice of unlimited liability has led to defensive medicine, that is, exhaustive tests and treatments used far beyond medical purposes. These extras are done to provide a defense against the inevitable lawsuit in case anything goes wrong. This uber caution has become a major cost driver in American medicine. Congress should set reasonable and realistic limits on the monies which can be given to the victims of everything from malfeasance to honest mistakes. No more windfalls for injury lawyers. The larger issue is universal coverage, care for the poor and other underserved members of our nation. The concept of universal care is a noble and worthy cause, but socialized medicine is not the only or even the best solution to achieve universal care. We have government programs to feed the hungry, to provide health care for the elderly, to protect the innocent. We can provide health care access to the poor and the underserved, whether because of poverty or location. And we can do a better job than the COBRA coverage for those who lose their jobs. It is very tempting to design a system in which no government plays a role, but the most efficient way to care for the poor would seem to be a state-run program which levies a small per capita fee on each pool of insured to be placed in a designated fund administered by the state for the benefit of qualified citizens. A model for such a program might be the Medicaid programs we have in each state now, or the uninsured driver programs administered by the states. We have now discussed the entire healthcare cycle without mentioning Medicare. There is a moral and legal mandate involved in Medicare which does not exist elsewhere. Medicare works reasonably well as a medical insurance system for those who contributed to it all their working lives. The most prudent and honorable way to approach Medicare would seem to be to leave it alone for those to whom commitments were made, even while moving slowly toward a system of patient-centered Medicare or health care for those just starting out, with free choices developed for those in the mid-career. The pressure of the free market system we have been describing will undoubtedly alter and reform Medicare as the new system matures in due course. So, here is a free market system, what a free market system might look like. It fulfills all our goals for an American system that is state-of-the-art, namely more based on more medical personnel, available to all in need. The health insurance is not limited to employers. Affordable, because more competition will lower costs. Abundant, because if there are no doctor zones left, they will be eliminated. And it is well financed, because reduced involvement of the government and in the insurance companies would reduce approximately $2 trillion in costs. To get there, we need 1, increase the supply of medical practitioners, 2, create a patient-centered system by letting the patient spend his or her own money on health care, and 3, create state-sponsored safety nets for the poor and the underserved. These proposals, of course, may seem radical today, even in today's free market culture, but sometimes the most obvious solution is indeed the best. The fact that the employer-based system we have today was initiated because the elite of another day needed a quick way to exempt health care costs from federal taxes. No one thought this simple IRS rule would hamper businesses forever, so let's change it. And now I'd like to welcome to the Dr. Larry Show, Dr. Edward Creagan, who is a physician of long-standing grand repute and who is willing to join us from Rochester, Minnesota today. Dr. Ed, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Larry, and you outlined an eloquent treatise of a very complex problem, and I would refer our leaders and our listeners to your website, where this document is easily accessible, and this is dated August 11th, 2019, and this is entitled, What a Free Market Healthcare System Might Look Like. So for our listeners, this is an excellent summary of a bewilderingly complex situation. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the plug, and I'm sure you have. Well, first of all, can you tell our listeners briefly what your where you are working, and I know that you have a curriculum vitae that is longer than most books, but can you give us a short version?
Yes, I am a board-certified medical oncologist and an internist. I am the first Mayo Clinic physician board-certified in hospice medicine and palliative care, and I've had a long-standing interest in health expenses and how we can help patients and families get the best care possible. And with my hospice palliative medicine hat, I would just like to refer our listeners to a book, and this is called Farewell. And this book reflects about 40 narratives, 40,000 conversations with patients at the end of life. And this is a GPS of the soul. This is a biopsy of our health system to help patients and families find a better way in the darkest days of their lives. And your outline really capsulizes the complexity of the problem, Dr. Larry, and the hope that we can do better.
Well, that certainly sounds like an important document. What do you think of the specifics of the proposal that I just made?
Somebody once said that the devil is in the details.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think anyone can intelligently dissect a very thorough analysis, but I might weigh in on a number of perspectives. You know, certainly within the next several years, we will be short about 100,000 physicians. And medical schools cannot be built soon enough to make up for this shortfall. And our listeners need to understand that a pandemic affecting the soul of medicine today is the phenomenon of burnout.
Yeah.
And until that issue is somehow modified, physicians will be retiring early, and those patients will be kept adrift. Another important issue that you touched on is the expense of medical education. Depending upon the school, a debt load of a single medical student might be $200,000 for a medical school couple that could easily approach $350,000. And that's why some schools, and I believe NYU has been a leader in this, that the tuition has been waived so that medical students are more willing to go into primary care and internal medicine, which are practices which do not provide great remuneration. Another issue that needs to somehow be addressed is to make the electronic health record more user-friendly. There are tremendous advances in the digital management of illnesses, but right now the record is not optimum and is a factor in some individuals leaving the profession. So I would invite the listeners to get on your website because you have eloquently addressed a bewilderingly complicated problem.
Well, I'm certainly very concerned about. In fact, I'm also suggesting that we use. I don't believe in getting the government involved unnecessarily, but in this situation with the shortage of medical professionals, it just seems to me that it's incumbent upon the government to step up and provide for adequate a scholarship type of program with. I'm thinking of something like what we have for the military. You know,
yes.
They go and they get a college education basically paid for, and then they have to give 2 years of their lives into service in the military.
Yes,
And it seemed to me that other countries do things similar for every college graduate. For example, Germany, they have a 2-year kind of donated service program for all college graduates. It seemed to me that that's something that we could certainly afford in this country. It'd be a lot cheaper than socialized medicine. And it would get a lot closer to the real heart of the problem.
Sure. You know, from many of my colleagues who have trained overseas, in most countries there is a mandatory 2 or 3 year service commitment, typically in a rural area, as part of the payback for the cost of their education. So I think you've touched on some creative approaches to somehow decrease the brain drain from hospitals and clinics.
Well, it seems like if we had more physicians and more medical professionals, that would also have some impact on the burnout period problem.
Yes, because patients are older, they're sicker, the technology is overwhelming. None of us can absorb the new changes. I have read data that in 1 week, 20,000 biomedical papers would be published online. And none of us can absorb this information. So if there are more practitioners, that decreases the pressures on the rank and file.
I think we have a question from our listener.
Yes.
Listener, are you with us?
Yes. Yeah, this is Tom Donelson.
Hi, Tom.
Yeah. The question that I want to kind of ask this question of Dr. Ed.
Yes.
Is this. Do you see an expansion, let's say, of nurse practitioners or PAs, or maybe a kind of trying to squeeze in for an internal medicine or family practitioner the education? What I mean by that is because because a lot of basically for a doctor you're going to get 4 years of medical school, then you got 3 years plus a residency.
Yes.
And that's like 7 or 8 years. Okay,
right.
A nurse practitioner, you're looking at 2 or 3 years of medical school before they go in. So,
yes.
So the question is, could one eliminate, let's say, a year off the education side for a general practitioner example, or maybe a year or 2 off the residency side, and still have a doctor prepared to be a doctor?
Yeah, and that's a superb idea, and it's clear that the nurse practitioner and the physician assistant typically come from very sophisticated programs. And for your fairly routine medical or even cancer problem, they are magnificent clinicians, and I would feel comfortable and proud to have them care for me or my family. They are conscientious, they know their limitations, and they do a superb job. And in fact, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, I believe that there are freestanding clinics of nurse practitioners and physician extenders providing absolutely state-of-the-art management. Now, let me just backtrack for a minute. I obviously went to college, medical school, and my cancer training from start to finish took 4 years, at which time I was board eligible. Today, those 4 years take almost 8 to 10 years. So there needs to be some different pathways for individuals who want to be researchers as opposed to those who want to be seeing patients like a Marcus Welby. So I do think that the so-called mid-levels, and in Minnesota we call them practice partners because they're in a partnership with us, do a superb job in providing conscientious care under very difficult circumstances. Superb question. Thank you.
Yeah, you can just do one follow-up, and then I'll turn back to Dr. Larry. Do you ever see a day in which, let's say, physician assistants or nurse practitioners can practice on their own? But normally, most states will have them associated with a physician.
Yes.
Is that a possibility, or would that be a possibility?
That's very clearly a possibility. And the model now might be 6 or 8 nurse practitioners working under the supervision of a physician, but the hands-on day-to-day management is on the hands of the nurse practitioners and the physician assistants. And the physician, although he's responsible or she's responsible, they are somewhat distant from the daily management of that patient. And in general, this works out very, very satisfactorily.
What about midwives?
I'm smiling here because I have a vague idea of what they do, Dr. Larry. I think in general they have superb training. They can act very independently, but I think they also are under the watchful guidance, albeit peripheral, of an obstetrician. And none of them are free agents, so to speak. They are remotely connected with that physician.
Is that still a viable profession in the United States, or is that kind of...
Oh, absolutely. Because most women, during the sensitive, sacred time of childbirth, are more comfortable with women practitioners than men. I think that's only
understandable.
normal.
Yeah, that's understandable.
So I think that the role of the midwife has been well defined, and they provide a dimension of comfort and compassion that we men may not always understand.
You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Bachelor Pad and the Bachelor Radio Network, News Radio Network. I'm having trouble with the new name here. My tongue gets away from my mind. Anyway, you're listening to the Dr. Larry Show.
Join Barry Barnes for Locker Talk on the Bachelor Pad Network as he presents NFL news and evaluates players. Fridays at 9 a.m. Eastern at blogtalkradio.com.
Hello, this is Sandy Eason, the host of Sandy's Secrets. Come and join us, where we will be talking about women's issues of sexuality, sensuality, and self-love. We'll be coming soon, exclusively on the Bachelor Pad Radio Network.
You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Bachelor News Radio Network.com. And we're talking to Dr. Ed Creagan, who has been kind enough to join us tonight. And he brings a practical experience and perspective to the problem of the American healthcare system that I obviously do not have. And in fact, I am not a healthcare economist either. But I did see the need for somebody to enter the list, so to speak, on behalf of a healthcare program that does not depend on either the insurance companies or the government. And Dr. Ed has been very supportive of that. We obviously I hit a lot of different problems when I was trying to develop this idea. And one of the first ones that we talked about has to do with the shortage of medical personnel. Then there's also the issue of the insurance companies. One of my good friends is a dermatologist who, every time I see him, whether it's in his office or not, he knows I'm in the political arena, so to speak, and he starts giving me what for about how insurance companies are running medicine for their own good. And I think maybe he's a little bit overreactive, but generally speaking, I think there's a lot of sort of pent up concern about that. Have you run into that yourself?
Oh, absolutely, Dr. Larry. There's resentment towards insurance companies effectively treating patients. And let me give you an example. There was a beloved colleague of mine who was a superb physician, and his son developed autism. And there was a nationally approved program supported by peer-reviewed data that his son would be helped by this outpatient program, and the insurance companies refused to pay for it. The physician was able to pay out of pocket at a tremendous sacrifice, and this saved the life of his son. But if the dad did not have the resources, the life of his son would be profoundly compromised. And every one of our listeners has an example of a procedure being recommended, of a test, of an intervention, and the insurance company refused to pay for it, and the patient did not get the care that they deserved. So there's something fundamentally wrong when an amorphous, anonymous organization is dictating the care that we and our families deserve.
And it's true of any big bureaucracy, whether it's insurance companies or whether it's the government, because these are not the whole orientation of such a organization is not individualistic at all.
Yeah.
What I'm suggesting is that if we get out from under the shadow of first of all, one of the big cost factors for national healthcare companies, insurance companies, is that they have to have almost a separate office for every single state that they're in because of all the different requirements of the 50 states.
Yes.
And then so that's a cost factor for them, but they also don't compete where they either don't want to fulfill the specific requirements of that particular state, and that's very true. I think in places like the Dakotas and some of the southern states where the clientele are not expected to be very well off anyway.
Yeah.
So therefore we have areas where there really isn't any available insurance coverage, and let alone bad insurance coverage. There isn't any at all. And then, so I'm suggesting we get the employers out of the way. For one thing, if you're starting a new company, and with the standard expectation of employees today, they expect you to cover at least part of their health insurance, so that the capital cost of starting a new company is increased sometimes 2 or 3 times.
Yes.
And then on top of that, you had the Obamacare thing where they had limited the number of hours that an employee could have without if you exceeded that, you had to give them health insurance. So
yes.
let's just get the employers out of the way. They don't want to do it anyway. And if we could have many more free association type of groups that would be in the market for insurance, we would have tremendous explosion of competitive insurance products.
And I think it also puts the burden on us patients as consumers to be a little more street smart and savvy about the cost of health care. One of our prominent leaders here in Minnesota made the comment that until you are sick, you have no concept, you have no insight into how good or how poor your health coverage is.
And that's undoubtedly true. I've been very fortunate myself and my family, and not to have to learn those lessons very much. But we know of certain people. I guess we all know of people that have really had, like you. I think you were saying the other day that a major cause of bankruptcy is actually medical care.
I believe that's true, Dr. Larry, that even among individuals who have health insurance, I believe that the most common cause of bankruptcy is health care expenditures.
And that goes against nature. That's wrong.
It's fundamentally unfair.
It's immoral. And yet we've got a system that requires or that causes that. So is there any activity among your fellow physicians to try to bring some of these issues to the attention of I guess you'd have to say the political establishment?
Yes, and I think one of the most vocal proponents of reform is a good friend and colleague of mine here in Minnesota. His name is Dr. Kumar, Dr. R. Kumar, Kumar, and he's been a vocal proponent of some sort of parity in the cost of medicines, especially in the area of leukemia and hematology and cancer, where a month of treatment might run $10,000 or $15,000, and oftentimes we cannot determine up front what proportion of that bill will be picked up by insurance companies.
And it's more than one month too, right?
Oh, yes. So you may only live a short number of months, and even if you can afford the medicine, then we're faced with this existential moral dilemma. Do I bankrupt my estate and my family with a medication that may prolong my life for a limited period of time? These are difficult decisions that we never struggled with, but we certainly do every day at the bedside.
So what is he doing?
He has been a very vocal author, writing in major medical journals, and has been very articulate on Twitter with credible data explaining why we have this dilemma, whereas the same medications in other countries are only a fraction of what our patients are paying.
Are they politically active?
They are medically active, and I think our policymakers are listening that the current system is flawed, it's not sustainable, and as a country we can do better.
Have you? Is that the most? I guess that's the most prominent person that you were familiar with.
Yes, but I do think that the medical student of today has a far more robust social conscience than perhaps students of a generation or so ago.
Yeah, that's
and a lot of
generally true.
And a lot of their training focuses on community engagement, the power of relationships, the power of culture. So I think we will see a wave of politically oriented, savvy medical students who are not satisfied with the current predicament.
Well, right now, as you know, from this, I'm putting on my political hat again. Right now is a very opportune time for a serious and non-socialistic series of proposal for adoption particularly by the Republicans, although not all the Democrats are in favor of socialized medicine either. But that's the reason I resurrected this article of mine, because if we could make some kind of impact right now on proper people, we might be able to get some action.
Well, Dr. Larry, I think your thinking is right on the money, because we're in a very volatile time with the run-up to the 2020 election, and I think now is the time for voices to be heard to somehow make this system work for patients and families.
You've been listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Bachelor News Radio Network.
If you want to hear another view of the latest developments in Trump's Washington, listen to the Dr. Larry Show. Every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Dr. Larry is a former businessman, entrepreneur, college president, and author who provides background and context for current events and trends in politics, education, foreign policy, and religion from a conservative perspective. Tune in and hear the other side as Dr. Larry talks with Washington insiders exclusively on blogtalkradio.com and the podcast at thebachelorpadnetwork.com.
Well, you're actually listening to the Dr. Larry Show. we always like to get that plug in. Didn't quite expect that right then, but I'll take whatever I can get. So we were talking about the possible political intervention of some key medical spokespeople. How would we go about getting some? If we could get some exposure to some of our ideas. My own contacts with the medical profession are a little bit outdated now. A lot of the people I knew back in the day have either retired or gone on to their eternal rest.
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering if there's some practical action that we could take that would be productive. Do you have any ideas along those lines?
The three major medical organizations have been profoundly touched by these economic issues, and I'm thinking of the AMA, the American Medical Association, an organization called ASCO, ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology. Another organization is called ASH, ASH, the American Society of Hematology. And the leadership of each of these organizations is acutely aware of the need to engage the political process, because the voice of only one group, namely the medical group, will get drowned out in a sea of controversy. So the leadership of these organizations, as well as other medical forums, clearly understands that we as a profession cannot do this alone, but we need the partnership with the other key stakeholders in this journey.
Are you familiar personally with the leadership in any of these organizations?
No, I am not, Dr. Larry. But I do know from position papers and from medical publications, each of them understands, since they're dealing with patients and their lives, the need to ratchet up the discourse so that the voice of the patient and the family is clearly heard in the tabernacles of decision.
Well, maybe we could start, if you could. I just feel like this is a very pregnant time for trying to come up with some relatively radical concept in this field, and I feel I'm very pleased that you were willing to share this with me tonight, because I think we have to somehow join forces and start trying to get some of these ideas floating around in some of the circles that eventually will have the decisions as to what kind of programs are going to be ultimately adopted.
Yes. Dr. Larry, I have a brilliant article here in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, and this was dated Sunday, August 11th, by Mr. D.J. Tice, T-I-C-E. And the title of the article is Beware Side Effects of Healthcare Policy. And he eloquently outlines how complicated these issues are, how no one voice can make all the difference, and the key stakeholders need to meet around the table in a collaborative, compassionate manner to somehow help the patients and the families during the darkest days of their lives.
Can you send me the URL of that, or?
Yes, I can do that. This is the Sunday Star Tribune, August 11th, a few days ago. Beware side effects of healthcare policy by Mr. Tyson. I can send you the link on this, Dr. Larry.
Yeah, that would be helpful. You know, I spent quite a bit of time in Minneapolis when I was with Control Data.
Yes, yes. It's a wonderful city, a wonderful spirit, a wonderful culture, and I'm just privileged to be part of this Minnesota experiment.
Well, Minnesota's also gotten pretty liberal in the last several years.
I'm gently smiling, but I think historically the mantra has been to take care of the orphan and the widow.
Uh-huh. Well, I guess you had your wrestler governor was interesting.
Yes, I'm smiling, and I remember a bitterly cold morning when I turned on the radio, and I was enlightened that we had a new governor. As I remember, it was about 30 below zero. It was like living in Siberia. I was looking for the yaks in the driveway, and there it was. He won.
I doubt if he could have won anyplace else.
I think you're right, Dr. Larry. I'm quietly smiling because I've never had chest pain in my life, but I think I did that morning.
Well, I remember those cold mornings. I used to have to go to Minneapolis once a week, and
yes.
We always had to take a. In those days, I had a cigarette lighter, and I used to use it for the key to my car, because usually the car had to stay outdoors all night.
Yes.
And you'd have to warm up your key to get it into the slot so you could unlock the car.
Yes.
It was.
And I might add, there's a caring, compassionate culture in the upper Midwest. There's a genuine desire to do the right thing, to help your neighbor, because we all do well if we all do well.
Where did you grow up originally?
Well, I'm smiling because it was a bizarre childhood. I grew up primarily on the racetracks of the East Coast. My father was a bookmaker, a handicapper, and a jockey's agent.
So you naturally became a physician, right?
Yes. And his advice to me, he used to call me Skipper. He said, "Skipper, never bet on anything that eats." So I've tried to follow. He also said, never invest in anything that needs to be repainted, especially a boat.
Well, that all explains why you became a physician.
Yes, but despite the issues and the challenges, it's a sacred calling, and there is no profession where we have an intimate snapshot of the soul of that suffering human being.
Well, I guess you might share that with a minister, wouldn't you?
Yes, and I once made the comment, I was not smart enough to get into divinity school, so I went into medical school.
Well, if you had gotten into ministry school, you probably wouldn't have prospered as well.
I've been very blessed.
And you wouldn't have had to work as hard.
I think you're right. Thank you.
Well, it's been a very delightful hour, and let's keep in touch here because I think we maybe we can trade perspectives a little bit and get something going, maybe.
Yes, and I think if we can gently move the needle, I think we will have done a service to our suffering brothers and sisters.
Well, it's such a profound, as you point out, it's a profound issue. It's essentially life and death.
Absolutely.
And we need to. I mean, frankly, the accusations of our friend Bernie are actually true to this, to the extent that there's no excuse for the kind of neglect that our really very wealthy society, the wealthiest probably in the history of the world, that doesn't seem to care for the homeless and the sick. But in this case, we're not just talking about the people on the fringes of society. We're talking about the people who make up the society, all of them.
Yeah, we're talking about you and me and our listeners and their families, right?
Exactly, and for us to have a medical system that is so corrupt and so it just doesn't there just doesn't seem to be. It's like trying to control an octopus or something. It's simply got so many tentacles out in so many different areas that it's very, very difficult to get your mind around. And I know that what I've done is not all that professional or all that profound, but I figure that you can curse the darkness or you can light one candle.
Yes, and you're lighting a candle with the power of communication, and for that we owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude and appreciation, Dr. Larry.
Well, I really appreciate that. I also want to thank you, Dr. Ed Creagan. That's like Reagan with a G, right?
I often say that to individuals. It's like Reagan with a C, and obviously everybody remembers the great communicator.
Yeah. Well, we want. I want to thank you for spending this time with us, and it's been a informative and delightful hour, and I look forward to. I look forward to maintaining our contact here. But before we do, is there some? How do people get a hold of you, or what? Have you got any recent books or articles or something you want to?
I want to just mention our book "Farewell" about end of life. Another book that is a bestseller on Amazon is called "How Not to Be My Patient." How Not to Be My Patient. And I have a footprint on Twitter, and it's at Edward Creagan, Creagan. And one of our websites is www.askdoctor.ed.com. So all of those options are available. And we're all in the same bucket, Dr. Larry.
Well, I enjoy being in the bucket with you.
Well, thank you. Likewise.
We just want to have a bucket list, do we?
Right. Good point.
Well, tonight we have been talking about free market healthcare system, what it might look like. Our guest has been Dr. Edward Creagan, and I'm Dr. Larry Fedewa. You can follow me on the BachelorNewsRadioNetwork.com, on my website, drlarryonline.com, DR for doctor, and also on YouTube this is under Lawrence Fedewa, and those were put on before I got on the radio and had to simplify my name. So we want to say good night and God bless everybody. You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show, and we're signing off.
Thank you, Dr. Larry.